a lot of people that buy cars that they either couldn't afford or were kind of forbidden when they were younger, okay? So in my family, I might as well say I want to be a Hell's Angel, you know? When I mentioned hot rods, I mean, it was like, you're kidding me, just get off of it, you know? And so I've always loved hot rods, my whole life, because I think hot rods are the most underappreciated category of cars on the planet Earth. And the golden years of hot rods were like the 40s and 50s. And Alex Exidius, who's 96 years old. Alex, are you here?
He is.
Right here. Alex Exidius, one of my inspirations. SoCal Speed Shop. I watched his ads, I looked at his ads. So I'm gonna probably ramble on here, I'm trying to keep a train of thought, but so I have an expression, you're never too old to have a happy childhood. And I just decided, you know, back in the late 70s, I saw a hot rod, highboy hot rod. I grew up with Tom Sparks and Tommy's daughter, Jennifer, in the room. Jennifer, wait, she's my little sister, and Eric. I grew up in his hot rod shop, so I always loved hot rods, never had one. I went from muscle cars I bought a Porsche in 1960 because it was like low horsepower and it wasn't a lot of money, it was $2,700, you know. But I always loved hot rods, and more importantly, I loved hot rodders, the guys that built these cars. These geniuses that put these hot rods together are so underappreciated in the world of cars. I mean, everybody can talk about Enzo Ferrari and Ferdinand Porsche, but when you think of the likes of Phil Remington and some of these greats like Alex, the guys that really put it together, these are as genius as it gets. Bobby Meeks, Dick Edelbrock. So it just seemed natural to me that these people should have their day in the sun. So I started with a little 32 highboy. Raylene used to drive it around with our kids in the rumble seat. And then I thought, well, I'm going to try and find some historic hot rods. And Tom Sparks, Jennifer's dad, had a speed shop or automotive shop right across the street from Paramount. I grew up on right near Melrose and Highland Avenue. That was my paper corner. And I used to hang out at his shop and see the cars come and go. And I just thought, someday. And Tommy and a fellow named Tony Nancy, Alex Exidius, Wally Parks, and Ray Brown, we'd all get together and have these lunches and just talk about hot rods. So I started looking into, you know, finding out where these historic cars are. And that kind of inspired me, and we restored you'll see upstairs 2D, this red, white, and blue coupe. And then we restored the belly tank, and then some other hot rods and race cars. But it just intrigued me, and Alma Hill is here, and she's heard me say this story before, but Phil Hill, I had the great privilege of every Friday having lunch with Phil Hill, Jack Nethercutt, who has Merle Norman, the Nethercutt collection, Tom Powell's, Dick Nolan, Tony Heinsberg, and who, if you've ever gone down Beverly Boulevard and you see this old place that looks like a castle, that was his father. He designed the Pantages Theater, I mean, a very famous designer. But every Friday we'd have lunch, and somehow we got around to hot rods. And Phil grew up, he's a Renaissance guy. He knows fine wine, he plays a musical instrument, speaks multiple languages, but his family forbid him to have anything to do with hot rodders. And he said, you know, and every local community had a car club. There was one in, you know, Hollywood, one in Burbank, you know, Montebello, Whittier, everybody had a car club. And there was one in Santa Monica called the Low Flyers. And Phil said, you know, my family just refused to have me hang with these guys. And he said, Bruce, do you know who was in the Low Flyers? I said, I have no idea, I've never heard of it before. He said, Phil Remington. Now, Phil Remington is the absolute genius behind Carroll Shelby and Dan Gertie. There is, I mean, he is genius status. Stu Hilborn, Hilborn Injection. Jack Engel, Engel Cams. Travers and Coons, all these absolute geniuses were low flyers, which just, you know, and all the great racers. I mean, Dan Gurney, Parnelli Jones, Bob Bondron, all these guys were hot rodders. So back when in the 40s and 50s, you didn't aspire to have a Ferrari or anything. I mean, you aspired to have a really cool hot rod, and that's what these guys did. And it just, the whole thing just started to make sense to me. So I think I've spent a good part of my adult life trying to nurture and understand appreciation for hot rods with everybody in this room. And everybody that knows me well knows of my great love for the hot rods. But more importantly, the people that made the hot rods. And this is a hobby that some people like Porsches, some Ferraris, some people like hot rods. But what brings us all together is just the great love of the car, and it's the car people. So for me, getting to know Dan Gurney and Phil Hill and everybody in this room has been the gift. You could take every car out of that gallery and out of my life, and I wouldn't even miss it compared to what's the people in this room.
How did you convince Pebble Beach to include a hot rod category?
So I can be as annoying as anybody. and so, I mean, Pebble Beach was like, you know, the high altar of car shows. I mean, to have a car at Pebble Beach, some people say, you know, just being at Pebble Beach is cool, and some people say, well, unless you win it is cool, and David Sidoric just won Best of Show at Pebble Beach, which is probably the most he's ever been in the limelight. Then he went and he won Best of the Best in Paris, France. But Peter Mullen has won it. There's probably some other people in this room. Oh, Ann Lee. Ann Lee, where's Ann Lee? Right over here. She flew down tonight, traveling with us. And Ann and her husband, Bob Lee, probably have one of the most important secret collections in the world. And Bob was so private, you didn't know what he had. But now Ann is beginning to treat us all with sharing those great cars. So I want to say thank you, because we've had some of your great cars in this museum. So at Pebble Beach, you know, everybody wanted to bring their fancy Duesenberg, and it was I'd love, at that time, I'd love to have a Duesenberg and put something out on Pebble Beach, but I just thought hot rods should be at Pebble Beach. And Pebble Beach was run by Lauren Tryon and Jules Human. And both beautiful people. But Jules was a bit of an elitist. And I mean, he would see me coming and he'd just turn and walk the other way, like, I don't want to hear about it, you know. But Lauren, fellow Berkeleyite, he's, you know, he listened to me, and if like Phil Hill even uttered the word hot rod or Dan Gurney, I would, or in print, I would send it to these guys and say, look, I'm telling you, this is really important. So for 10 years, I was maybe the biggest thorn and the most annoying person in their lives. Until finally they just said, okay. I got a fax from Lauren Tryon and said, okay, Bruce, this was in December. Are you sitting down? Okay, so one time we're gonna do hot rods at Pebble Beach, and like, I don't want to hear from you after that. Like, I said, done. So that's, it for me, and Roy Brizio and Dick DeLuna, and you know, these guys are hot rodders, but they also have other cars, but it was unheard of to think that there'd be a hot rod at Pebble Beach. So we really came out, and they put us in the farthest you could get. I'm telling you, 10 feet further we'd be in the bay. And it was like crazy. And so the funny thing is, everybody went down to the hot rods. It was like there was a whole nother show going on down there. And I mean everybody. I mean the likes of all the, you know, all the hoity-toity. They were all down there hanging out with us. And it was such a success. And, you know, they got over the hot rod deal. And by the way, there's a black Roadster that you came in on your left. That won in 1997. That was the first Pebble Beach winning hot rod. And it was a worthy choice. But so we brought it out today. I didn't even know it was going to be here till this afternoon. But I'm still working hard to let everybody understand, until you've driven a 32 or a 34 or some cool hot rod, you haven't experienced the road. And I got to give just another little shout out to Raylene, because Raylene does very well in nice cars, and then she does very well in my hot rods. And she's the best. She has been everywhere. We've done our third trip with Roy Brizio to Canada. But where was I going with this?
Before you took up.
Oh, just driving a hot rod. So it looks like the most uncomfortable, god-awful thing until you drive one. So I just want to encourage everybody, if you haven't driven one, drive one. It's not as expensive as a GTO Ferrari, and you'll have way more fun. And then you can hang out with Roy Brizio and DeLuna and Scott Hawley and Tom Bloy. Now Tom Bloy's another guy that's kind of fancy schmancy, and now he's full-on hot rod. So, and most of my friends have now have a hot rod somewhere. And even Jeff Swart had a belly tank that he would drive to the car show. So we're, slowly but surely, we're just ticking it off. Everybody will have one somewhere.
With the wide